Hello, Mike.
Hello, Rula. Nice to see you again.
Indeed, I'm so pleased to host you for the second time in a short period. So thank you for your time, Mike.
Oh, heaven's sakes, thank you. I had such a good time last time. I'm looking forward to today's webinar or live session.
Thank you. And Mike, we are here today because we had lots of questions last time from the last session we couldn't answer, and it's a topic of interest. So I look forward to start by asking you the questions that we didn't answer and then take the answers from the audience, the questions from the audience, of course. So before we start, Mike, I would like to welcome everyone and say bonjour à tout le monde qui nous joint. And we really look forward to your questions and your engagement today. Um, just a few guidelines before we start. This webinar will be recorded, same thing as we did for the part one webinar, and Orion is going to put the link of the past recording in the chat, and this way you can have access to it if you want to see the entire presentation of Mike. And also we're gonna, as I said, dedicate the most of our time today to Q&A. I know I'm gonna maybe present you again for the second time, Mike. Short and sweet, but it's very important, especially for the new joiners today. I know that you are a very highly respected executive coach and consultant, and you started your career by answering phone to a global suite executive, and you have really coach high performer and translated strong result into visibility, influence, and next level opportunities. So I am pleased again to host you, Mike. As I said, we met at the North American Women in Tech Award last year in Toronto, and I know you are a great supporter and ally for women in technology. And you were also top finalist for Best Ally Award, so a well-deserved recognition. Thank you very much, Mike. Just one thing, I said it last time during our part one, is about women in tech. So women in tech is really about this community that we are building across more than 65 countries and six continents. It's a community that support women in leadership development, mentorship, networking, and continuous skill growth. So uh, save the date on September 9th. We have our flag annual event that's going to happen in Montreal, September 9th. It's a full day. We have a symposium and the ceremony for the award. A prestigious ceremony for the awards gonna happen during the evening, September 9th. I hope that we find everyone that is interested to go to our site, Women in Tech, that also Orian's gonna put in the chat to keep yourself up to date about the event on September 9th and the category, the nomination category that you can nominate yourself or nominate a woman colleague in your environment. So, Mike, thank you very much again. And I would like to give it all to you before we start our question, because I think you want to resume a bit, a small summary about the presentation of part one.
Excellent. Thank you, Rula. And absolutely, we had so many questions, and I like it as much as possible to create interactive environment. And obviously, on a live session, we can't be totally interactive, but I want to briefly recap and set the table in terms of what we described last time. And I start by saying I want to reinforce the September 9th event. Last year was in Toronto, and that's where I met you, and that's where I met so many of you. And it was an amazing event. I was so honored to be a finalist for Top Ally Award, and it really helped me see how your organization supports women in their careers in the technology field. And I tell you, if you guys, anybody listening, watching this, gets a chance to go September 9th in Montreal, please do so. Uh, Now, last time in our live session, we talked about three performance ceilings, and it's how high performers can hit three different ceilings that even when they're at the peak of their powers, the peak of their influence, that can get stuck with these three ceilings. And in that presentation, I introduced Monique, one of my clients. And Monique, we used her story to describe the challenges faced. In fact, went beyond challenge. Monique's words for me as I prepared for the session was, I'm in pain. I have this dual forces thing. I've hit a certain career plateau. I can't break through. I've tried to act like my boss. I've tried to be like my boss. I've tried to be like somebody else. I try to be like the guy who got promoted around me. And I've kind of lost who I am. So the dual force is it me? Am I doing something wrong? Or is it the system? And that's a continual ping pong match that could go on for top performers wondering, how do I break through to the next level? And is it me or is it the system? So we dived into that and I talked about the three ceilings. So briefly, I'll say that we'll get right to the questions and answers. But the three ceilings are the first one is the identity ceiling, what I call executive presence. I want to emphasize that over the course of my career, when I was on both the board of Barclays Bank, Santander Bank, and then Tandem Bank, a digital startup, I've hired four CEOs in my career, and I've hired numerous executives. I could tell you a lot of times the decision, especially when it's internal, to who to hire has already been made. So executive presence is massively important because it announces who you are. And the challenge is we can lose who we are a little bit because we have insecurities and doubts, and you get this imposter syndrome that pops up. So we talked about that ceiling and how to break that identity ceiling. And actually, the answer is to go back to who you are. Quiet this and open up this, and you will find who you are. And that's your most powerful self. And that gives you the chance to announce your presence in a wholly different way. So you're seen differently. Now, there's a lot more to that. I'm going to skip over it because we talked about it last time, but a ton of work around that. But that's massively important is the executive presence. That's the number one. When you say what was the how did somebody get promoted? What was the reason? It's executive presence is number one.
Yeah.
Number two was the most difficult one, and that is called the skills ceiling. So what happens, especially high performing women, they develop their skills, they develop their focus on delivering under budget, on time, and delivery, delivery, delivery. And that, in a way, is think about it as task focus. Not that it's a task to and not all the projects are not tasks, but it's a task focus, meaning if I do my job really well, that should be enough to get promoted. And sadly, it's not because the second thing that somebody looking to get promoted needs to convey a strategic focus. For me in my career, that was the most difficult transition to move from a look, I'm doing a great job. I must be ready to get focused and then watch other people get promoted. And I had to learn how to become a systems thinker, not a task thinker. So strategic focus, massively important. And it starts making sure that I'm heard in a different way because I can see the bigger picture. And
Okay.
that leads to the third ceiling then is the environmental ceiling. And this ceiling is just really important to make sure that you are showing up in the right places at the right time. Understand the power structures. Learn how to see around corners. A lot of people call it politics, but if your authentic self, it's not politics. It's actually making sure that your performance, performance, but the things that you're doing and the way you think is being known around the organization in the power structures, and you begin not to build just mentorship, but you begin to build advocacy, which is something that women in technology really massively important that they do that. And there's ways to do that. So that's the three ceilings. We talked about those, and then how to break through those, and that led to a really amazing question and answer that we should dive into right now, Rula.
Indeed, Mike, and thank you for this recap. I really appreciate, and hopefully during the question and answer period, we're gonna understand more about the how. It's good to know what, but how to do,
Yeah.
how to break those ceilings. So let's start with one of the questions from part one session about how can someone lead with empathy and emotional intelligence without being seen as soft. And this is something soft, something we hit a wall as women very often. Like, uh, do we need to compare ourselves to men? Do we need to act like men in order to have a a place at the table? Do we need to be aggressive? Do we need to be very ambitious? What do you think, Mike?
Yes, boy, that's a great description. It's a wonderful question because that's something I can relate to. In my career, I was a different type of leader. I was, as I mentioned, 35 years in banking. I was never a banker. What I was a people leader. And as a people leader, I had a specific style. I put people over profits. So that's not popular in a bank. And so I had to build enough successes that people learned to trust me with the way I'm doing things and actually would outperform. So I know what it's like to appear soft. I had so many bosses tell me, Mike, you need to have a close, your door's too open. Your door's too open. Emotional intelligence is massively important. So once you work on understanding that you actually are enough, you do know enough. You don't need another certification. You don't need another skill. You also need to have the confidence that you can grow into the role, but you need to do it in your way. I've seen a lot of clients that the worst work they do is when they try to emulate what they think is the right way or the way that's honored in the organization. That will expose you over the course of time. You need to do it your own way. And emotional intelligence, all that means to me is that when you're talking to someone, you're understanding where they're coming from. That doesn't mean you give them what they want. That doesn't mean you don't manage them or you don't lead them. What it means is that you understand where they're coming from so you can understand their motivations for acting or behaving or doing what they do. Now, by the way, emotional intelligence, oftentimes we wish our bosses had more of it. And my question is, but do you have enough of it? Emotional intelligence with your boss, with the CEO, with other senior managers, that's very important that you apply that to them because you'll see somebody who seems to attack your work, maybe in a more senior position. Wonder what their issues are. What's happening in their world, why they would say that? What's going to get them fired? So that's really, really important to do that. Then you apply your personality, your authentic self, your most powerful self to working on that relationship and working on understanding that, because then you will choose the right way to communicate. Then you won't have to worry, am I strong or soft? You're just you. And it sounds almost counterintuitive because we have to announce ourselves in some way. Trust me, if you understand where they're coming from, you will get the right answers to the right question as opposed to the one you think you need to come up with. And so that's kind of a two-part answer to that question, but it's really important to be yourself. And it's very, very important to utilize your emotional intelligence skills and make sure you develop those.
Thank you very much, Mike. I just want to remind everyone that they can send us new questions in the Q&A. And Mike, you about soft being soft, there's a difference that I we need to understand. This difference between being soft means listening to other, understanding others, and putting ourselves in their shoes. I think that we should not put ourselves in someone else's shoes. We need to keep that distance. Being soft, there's a difference between empathy and
Sympathy.
yeah. So I think this is something that we need to make the distinctions. If you want to become strategic leader, is listening, understanding, and making the right decision, but it doesn't mean that you need to be that person or reflect on that person yourself. Okay, thank you very much for that. So let's move on to the second question, Mike, which is, do you have any recommendation on how to rebuild your confidence in your strengths after a layoff? And it's about confidence. So what do you think, Mike, about this question?
Okay, so this is obviously something that's going on right now, especially in the tech world, and it's massively important to have the what I would say is the right mindset around this. And there is a mourning process that takes place when you're laid off. In fact, the Monique that I described was just laid off. Um,
Mhm.
by email, no really conversation. It was done immediately as if she, stole something. It was just, it's incredibly non-human a lot of the times of what's going on right now, especially large tech companies. So the first thing is understand that there's a mourning process. With all a mourning, Don't try to gloss it over. Don't try to pretend it doesn't feel bad. Don't try to go through the mourning process, because the more you get into it, the more you allow it to happen, the quicker you'll come out of it, like any mourning. But a way to then start moving away from that, preparing your mindset for what's next, is there's a tendency to feel that it's about me, and you personalize it. And I use my hands to describe this, but it's as if you had a soccer ball and it was right here and said, this, it lives too close to my heart. I feel like I was rejected. I feel like I was laid off because of me. In reality, the way these layoffs are happening, it's not personal at all. Somebody has a big list of names and there's a salary next to them and there's a number that they need to hit, and it's pop, pop, pop. And so it's awful. But in a way, it's a gift, because it means it's not about you. And you've got to take that feeling and move it out of your heart and hold it objectively, and assess it and turn it in your hands almost. I visualize this and assess it and say, it's not me, it's this situation. And so how do I prepare myself, and where do I go next? And that mindset is a lot around worthiness. You want to interview the next company just as much as they want to interview you. You need to understand their values and their culture and do a lot of research around how do they do things. My suggestion would be, try not to make that. I know it's really hard to not take the first job that comes along. My suggestion is, choose the job that allows you to, that's going to be a longer term ability to flourish in that role. Not the first one that comes along where 6 months in, you've got the exact same problems that you had in the previous organization. So interview them, be very clever how you understand their culture and what's going on, and then show up for that interview and knowing that you need to understand them as much as they need to understand you. The last point I'll make is this. One of the things is we tend to get our CV and say, here's what I've done. They can read that. You want to convert that CV into capabilities. So if you notice, the third thing was a line item where I said I had done this thing, this project, or I had this role. The biggest insight for me was that I learned how to become more strategic. Or the biggest insight for me was I learned that this project, if I did it the way I was being asked, didn't have sponsorship. So I had to actually gain sponsorship with other stakeholders. That was a huge takeaway. So now I have that experience. It's a whole different way to talk about yourself in capabilities versus line items on your CV. So there's a few thoughts on the mindset. At first, it can feel defensive. The whole goal that I'm giving you is get on your front foot beyond the offensive as you search for a place that's worthy of you, is what I'd say.
So, Mike, what I hear from you, it's normal to be sad. It's normal to have conflictual feelings after a layoff. And what I hear you also saying about not taking the first job that offered to you, maybe it's the perfect job. We never know. Maybe it's a dream job, but maybe we need to take time to think what we want, because most of the recruiter, the first thing when they talk to you, they ask you, what do you want? And sometimes you don't have an answer.
Oh, this is so important. By the way, this is for relationships as well. Um, it's like sometimes we think what we don't want, and that's okay. And your list of things say, what I don't want. I don't want this. I don't want this. Great. You're aware of that. Now put it to the side. Therefore, what do I want? And we don't think about it that way. And so come up with it doesn't have to be just bullet points is good enough, but I want this, and I want this feeling, and I want this upward mobility, or I just want impact. I want a team that I can have some say in. I want to be empowered. You're so right, Rula. And I'm glad you said that, because if we tell the recruiter what we don't want, we're going to get something that looks kind of like that, believe it or not. So we need to describe what we want. You need to be very articulate and very to the point, because it will help the recruiter help you.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, so let's move on to another question, Mike, that we have received about what advice would you give to women early in their careers who want to position themselves for high-performing careers?
Okay, so early career, and you want to position yourself, and the first thing is I would say is scan the environment, understand the lay of the land, so you know yourself. understand the lay of the land and what's happened in the company. Um, the third ceiling that I mentioned before, that whole environmental ceiling, when you're brand new, you have a chance to be under the radar and understand power structures. Where's the budgets going? Where's the growth going to be? Which senior executive has the most followers at the ear of the CEO? And you want to tap into that energy and understand exactly how does it flow in this company. Then you want to begin to position yourself so that you can take advantage of that knowledge so you can start seeing where it goes. The example that I give, Rula, is at a time I was a financial advisor and I became an executive director for the financial advisory firm for a large bank. And I didn't like my boss. I didn't like him. And by the way, he didn't like me. And so it was extremely challenging because we just both knew it. And I tried to be like him, and my team didn't like me because I was not myself. So that's why I learned how to be the authentic self. Even though he didn't like the way I managed when it was just me, I started assessing the power structure and I started looking where the growth was happening. And actually, it was happening in the core bank. All the investment was going there. I would never go higher where I was. So I actually took a two-level demotion to go down two levels, but to get in the growth engine of the company. And it gave me a chance to prove myself in the larger organization. 30 months later, I became the head of the investment arm and I fired my boss who didn't like me. So the whole idea is to scan that environment, understand where the growth goes. I would have been smarter had I done it earlier. I mean, everything's a gift, right? It was not very fun to not be liked by your boss and to try everything and not please. In this case, it was a him. But then when I switched over, and then when I understood how things worked, I was able to make a massively different career result. And I was found out that's where I learned how to be my authentic self was actually the best way to go. And from there, my career took off. So that's what I wish I had done earlier. And if this helps new people starting, please understand where the company is going to go. Where's it going to be in 5 years? What division, what product, what area is going to be needed? And I would focus on that right off the bat right now.
Yeah, Mike, and like concentrate on beyond your job. Like I know that you have a
Mm.
role and responsibility, you're doing it on a daily basis, but you need to understand the bigger picture. So be curious and go searching for information in order to grow. And that was a strategic step from you, Mike. Like you went like two level down in order to understand and build yourself again. So that was very strategic. Not everybody has would be as open to do that. I guess it needs lots of confidence, which bring me to my next question because we're talking about a boss that don't like you, about how to prove yourself again, which bring me to this question, which is a combination of 3 or 4 questions we received last time. It's about stereotypes. It's about building personal brand. It's about building confidence. So, how do you recommend addressing stereotype that undermine personal brand and confidence, Mike? It's a big question.
It is a really big question. And it's, as always, my answer is going to be less complete than I wish because context is really important. I
Okay.
need to understand the exact context, but I can tell you that this is where the authenticity that I've referred to kind of comes in. So the question is it me or is it the system? It is really important question. And I always start with me. And here's why. This gets a little complicated, but please bear with me on this. I believe the world reflects what I project. Now, we think I project from my intellect and my words, but in fact, we're all energetic beings. We project a presence. And the question is, if that presence is filtered by self-doubt and insecurity, we project self-doubt and insecurity, and we get back people who treat us like we have self-doubt and insecurity. So even when this seems like the odds are stacked against you or the system is stacked against you, it's very important to find your true north so that as you present yourself to the most secure possible, the most the least self-doubt, you understand where the self-doubt comes from. Now, I'll just do this quickly because again, this is life's work, right? But self-doubt comes from past events in your life. So we have this thing called ego. It's a mind brain, and it's our storyteller. And it records every event in our life. And guess which ones it remembers? The ones with the highest energetic charge. Guess which ones have the highest energetic charge? The traumas, guilt, shame. Success is one of them, but the others are failure, regret. Those get recorded. And so as they come into my mind and say, who am I? It begins to be this convoluted picture of you're not enough, really. So be careful. It becomes my inner risk manager telling me, nah, don't go too far there. Or don't act like yourself here. You need to act like that person here. And that self-doubt is very, very destructive to your ability to project who you are. So to change your projection, change your image of yourself, and there's a lot of exercise and a lot of work to do that. But if you do that, it changes your life. There's no such thing as work-life balance. It's called life. This is actually your life journey. Now, once you do that, and once you feel like you're in a good place or you're doing the best you can in terms of this life work, the question is now you feel I'm worthy. I'm not lacking. I'm actually worthy of something. And I'm worthy of getting something from this organization. And if there's prejudice, bias, if there is systemic, um, um, mm, let's go as far as saying dislike, you first want to analyze it and say, make sure, is it systemic or is it just isolated? Is it just my boss or is it just this? Because as you start looking at it, you can shift parts of the company like I did. There's a bias against me. It was personal, really hurts. So I had to get out of that pool and go into a different pool, a different talent pool. Turned out it was a much bigger talent pool, but that's if it's isolated. If you're analyzing it and you're scanning the environment, say, you know what, this is a cultural issue. I see this permeating the entire organization. Um, Andrew Mohammed and I had this conversation. You guys might have all met Andrew Mohammed in Toronto or several of the workshops for women in tech global. She said one of the biggest things that changed her was a conversation with me when I said, are they worthy of you? She was talking about her boss, and her boss wasn't fair, and her boss was not, and he wasn't fair. This guy was a disaster as a boss. I said, well, is he worthy of having you there? And it was like, boom. It sounds so simple to say, but she felt it to her core. And it caused her to change and say, this person is not worthy of me being there. And the company allows him to, I don't need to work this company. And she launched her own very successful endeavors. In fact, her endeavors are amazing. So my point is, know thyself and then understand where does this fit in the organization, this level of bias or dislike, or is it me or is it everybody that looks like me? Is it everybody that thinks like me? What is it exactly? You need to scan that environment and then be very honest and say, you know what, this may not be the place for me because I'm worthy of having an organization that can see past my gender, my race, my functional value, whatever it is, and can accept me for who I am. And you must change organizations at that point or places in the organization. So, like I said, it gets pretty complicated, and I try not to carry on too long with answers, Rula, but that is a quick run through of some pretty complex stuff, but that's how I would address that issue.
Thank you very much, Mike. Again, I encourage everyone to send us their question via Q&A. Just back to your to what you just said. So there, I think that there is a difference between, no, not a difference, but being authentic is very important. Okay, we because it's your differentiator. This is what makes you different from others. However, you hear stuff like you need to play the game, you need to reposition your leadership style, you need to like what's your saying about that, Mike? Like okay, being authentic, I am authentic. And when you are asked to reposition yourself, rebrand yourself, or work on yourself, so how do you take that?
Okay, so when I hear that question, I think about that and say, number one, think about your role. This sounds strange, but think about your role is to solve problems for the company. The greatest opportunities you can build in your career is to willingly take on one of the biggest problems they have. I can't tell you underlying the stories I've told you already. I can't tell you how valuable that was to me. Is to look at the fact saying, you know what, I'm getting paid for my time spent here, and I have results that I want from this. I have things that I want, and I need to solve the problem for the company. So I asked when I went 2 levels down, I asked for the biggest problem that they have. And they said, without a doubt, it was actually becoming a branch manager from executive vice president of the subsidiary to a branch manager in the organization as a vice president. So, and it was a branch that was historically troubled. I loved it. I loved it because it got a chance to show and become very visible without ever positioning myself. And it got a chance to display what I could do. We built I can tell you guys, it's in 18 months, we built the most from one of the biggest disasters of a branch with legal issues and customer issues. We built into the most profitable branch in the entire system in just 18 months because we did it by building a high performing team. So I got a chance to show I'm a safe pair of hands to take a dysfunctional team and bring them along and make them functional. So that was a huge opportunity. So number one, you're there to solve a problem for the organization. Number two, understand that if I talk about that, if I can take on the biggest challenge, it might be a product, it might be a project, it might be data cleanup, it might be AI implementation. The biggest challenge, and if you put yourself on that front line because you know yourself, you know what you're good at, you can actually then get a chance to show in various ways how you can perform at that level and the value you add. And I'll tell you, for me, once they realized I was a safe pair of hands, I went from managing 22 people. So I managed 14 investment advisors. I switched over, managed 22 people in this branch. Then I managed 22 branches. Then I managed 2,400 branches and 17,000 people because I was a safe pair of hands. And that built my power base because they knew I unlocked the keys to the kingdom in terms of engagement and connection with my team, and nobody else had that capability. So when there was layoffs, they knew they had to leave me there. I didn't play politics at all. In fact, I was a maverick. My organization is called Cimarron Advisory. Cimarron is a Native American, the Cheyenne tribe word for maverick, because I would not conform, but I had to earn my stripes before I could expand my nonconformity.
This is great. Thank you very much, Mike. So I have a question. You question about you were talking about one of the ceiling is the environment, and this question is about what internal resistance what internal resistance do you see most often women start stepping into their authentic power, and how can they move through it? So what are the resistance for women when they
Okay.
when they start using their power, and how can they move through that?
Okay. I'm going to give an interesting, probably surprising answer. First of all, every point of friction that you face in your career is a growth opportunity. Philosophically, one of the challenges with AI is it's removing points of friction in our life. Well, if points of friction is where we grow, we're actually risking stunting our growth. So when you come up against points of friction for your career and your personal authentic brand, it's a wonderful growth opportunity to already question, who am I? Am I showing up my powerful self? Now, this question assumes I've already done that. So then what type of friction? I can tell you almost 80%, 75, 80% of my clients work for women. And there's a very odd thing that I would love everybody listening to this call to take away, which is when you are a woman on the rise, or when you're a woman who has attained a higher level, please leave the ladder down. It's almost this badge of honor that they fought their way to this role, and there's not very much sponsorship. I worked for a woman for 24 years. I had a CEO, a COO that was a superstar, but wow, my boss, she was tough on this other woman. Really, she made her work so hard. And so I always thought it was maybe men are harder on women, but I want to point out that sometimes in the case of Monique, she had two female bosses. So be aware of that. And I beg you, if you're in a position of influence, please leave the ladder down and help the people come through the organization, the women come through the organization, um, just like you did, but being their authentic self. That's first point. The second point is that a point of friction is once our authentic self, it's then the question is then how to switch. We we get so caught up in doing a good job. So if I'm my authentic self, I accept who I am, and I'm not social media authentic, I'm really authentic, I'm feeling very secure. But if I look at doing a good job as the thing that will promote me, that's where this strategic focus really comes in, okay? It comes in and say, wait a second, I did my project, I gave it to my boss, they took it to their boss, they got a bonus, I got a pat on the head, I got a small bonus, and they say, keep up the good work. Well, the point is that um, had a way to shift that is to understand this is not just about making my boss look good, but what does the boss's boss need for this project to work? Oh, they need risk management. Oh, they might need technology. They might need operations. They might need compliance. What if I thought of the questions and things my boss needs, but also what are the needs of these other departments to see and have a point of view on this product I'm creating or this project I'm working on? And if you socialize that with those others and understand, you could be talking to somebody two levels higher, but say, I'm working on an important project. Deliverables are going to be something that we're ultimately going to need you to do. Your participation or your thoughts now would be really, really helpful. Be guarded and be smart and share what you need to share. But by bringing them along, you're now creating advocacy and you're announcing yourself as a person who gets along with others. And you strive to make sure that when this project's announced, it's now picked up seamlessly by people who are already fans, not of you, but of the work you're doing. And that's that strategic focus. The same thing brings you then to the environmental focus, which means now you've got relationships with people in other divisions. And now you can start seeing what are other things you worry about? What are other things? And you're going to find out there's things you can know about. And you can actually not only help your boss, or if your boss is not really a good boss, you're beginning the process of understanding other power structures you can work around your boss. And maybe one day you can help your boss find a new job, which is what I got to do. It wasn't quite as fun as I said, but it was a justification of the changes that I made. Really, does that answer your question? Does that help a little bit?
It answers and it answers, and maybe we can dive more because I have another question about, you mentioned the ladder, you mentioned about helping others as well. So we can dive more in this question because we have a
Okay.
second one, which is how allies can actively support high potential women in accelerating the progression. So you mentioned some of the tips, like what we can do, listening, asking them to speak up, and listen to their ideas. But what else we can put, like concretely, other stuff leaders or women or ally can support women progress, career progress.
Okay. So mentoring is a really good thing to do. It's not enough, but it's a start. When you mentor somebody, or there's somebody on your team that you're their supervisor and you want to help them, one of the first things I would do is gain their permission to have open and honest communication.
Okay.
That means performance reviews need to be beefed up. Now, they don't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be, um, we don't have to change the structure, but the communication has to be, we have to have their permission. Can I speak openly? And almost everybody will beg you to tell them where they're not doing a great job. And yet sometimes we gloss over it and we use fancy words to say, oh, you're doing these three things great. You're not doing these three. Go, get a book, get a mentor, hire a coach, take a class. I mean, it's like only four things we can tell people to do. But if we want those discussions to be very meaningful, and if we get the permission of the person, whether it's a performance review or a mentoring, and if they'll give permission, and if you feel the vibe is they really want to know, not so they can penalize themselves but they want to grow, you can choose words to help them understand how they communicate and how they're showing up. It's very important because you cannot read the label from inside the bottle. They can't read the label from inside the bottle. So they'll want to know what things can they do better, and they'll want very a lot of specifics. Um, Let me think of an example that I had with somebody I mentored at a small company, but I mentored her, and she brought her, not too small, but smaller company, but she brought her a presentation that she was going to do to her boss and her boss's boss. And she showed me the presentation. It was really nicely done. It was fantastic. And it said, here's the 5 projects I'm working on. What do you think about it? And I said, this is wonderful. You're never going to get promoted. Well, I had her permission to speak openly. She goes, what do you mean? I said, this deck says, look how hard I'm working. And it's begging them to pat you on the head and tell you, good girl, and go back to work. I hate those words, but that's what I had her permission to say. Can we speak openly? And she said, what's going on? I said, look, is your boss's is a man, right? She said, yes. I said, okay, what's going to get him fired? She goes, oh, project number 5. I said, make that project number 1. And when you speak to project number 1, lean forward and look at him and say what this project means and where it's on track and what it's going to deliver. And you're leaning forward. I said, now what's going to get your boss, male or female? She goes, female. Okay, good. Which one is it? She goes, it's project number 3. Make that project number 2. And for her, lean back and say, how this project, fold your fingers together, how it's integrated, how it will help solve her problems. Not so direct in this way, but I hope you understand energetically this way. And then the other 3 projects are good things that you're doing that you're delivering for yourself. She made those changes in the deck. We didn't change the deck at all. We just reorganized it and a little help with the body language so that she's talking to them, meeting where they are. She got a $25,000 raise in the meeting and promoted 1 level. So
Yeah.
sometimes the most simple ways, but I had permission to be direct. It wasn't a lot of words and it wasn't a big change, but she all of a sudden showed up differently. So that's a very tactical way. And sometimes you need somebody if they're going to be a mentor. Please tell me what I can do better. Not so I can punish myself, but so that I can see how I come across. And by the way, you don't have to accept it. I've had a lot of mentors, bless their hearts, have told me things that I needed to do. No, I didn't tell them I was going to do it, but I didn't do it because I didn't like the advice. But you need to be discerning with that. And if you're going to help somebody, you need to make sure that they give you the permission to be open and honest. If not, you could stay at a high level. But if you've fought your way to the top, please try to make it so the next person doesn't have to fight their way to the top. They've got to be worthy of your attention and they need to be worthy. They need to be a rising star, but you can pave that road ever so slightly so you become a sponsor, not just a mentor.
Yeah, and thank you for concluding on that because I wanted to ask you what's the difference between mentor and sponsor from a career
Oh,
growth perspective.
okay. A sponsor is synonymous with advocate. A mentor is synonymous with teacher. Okay, so mentor gives you information, helps reinforce how you're thinking, gives you some great thoughts. A sponsor or an advocate will leave that room, and when there's discussion about who's next to get promoted, they advocate for you. That's what you want. That's where women have the most difficult time is to create real advocacies. Advocates who say, when I can tell you what happens you guys in executive committees or the boardroom, depending on the level, we have this roles opening and we have these internal candidates. Oh boy, there's a whole conversation about talent pipeline, which we can't get into right now, but oh man, you can't believe the talent pipeline, how it works. But anyways, we have these internal candidates. Who are we looking for this role? Who fits? Your sponsor, your advocate will say, that person, I want that person to do it because I've listened to them, I've talked to them, and I've seen them make adjustments. I think they're ready now. That's how the decision is made before you even interview for it.
Thank you for that clarification, Mike. And you mentioned something earlier about the environment, and we have a question about what are the red flags that indicate the environment, not the individual, is the real barrier.
Okay, values. I'm so glad this question came up because I haven't even talked about values. Values are those things that get us out of bed every morning, those things we hold most dear, the things that we stand for. Now, the organization also has values, and they're on the elevator or the lift walls, or they're in the lunchroom, or they're on your computer. We stand for these 5 things. Da, 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 da. I can't tell you how important it is to assess the values displayed versus the values that they promise they stand for. See, if they stand for those 5 values, every decision in the organization must flow through those values.
Okay.
To give an example, if you have a colleague who's laid off by email, that doesn't fit human, kind, caring, dynamic, driven, integrity. It doesn't fit anything. That's a gap. And when that gap starts appearing in more ways than one, trust is eroded. Now you're working for hypocrites. We stand for this, but we do this under pressure. So you want to assess the values of the organization. Look, I left as a president of Washington Mutual's retail division in I was at the height of my career there. Everything was fantastic, but they brought in some other executives from big organizations. One is from Chase Bank, one is from General Electric. The HR director was from Cisco, and they started messing with our five values. And yeah, we need more. We need that. We got to change this. We got to change that. And they started making decisions that were against my values. Like, I mean, fundamentally against my values. I quit. I moved from Seattle to London. And I quit, and I went to work for Barclays because it was that important. 2 years later, they became the biggest bank failure in U.S. history. Not because I left, but because they had distorted their values and what they said they stood for, they didn't when they went to make subprime loans. They made subprime loans to appeal to shareholders because they got a higher yield on those loans. It all's fine as long as there's no housing crisis. Well, guess what? There's a massive housing crisis, the biggest in the history. And it brought that organization down. Sixth biggest bank in America went broke. I know two colleagues who committed suicide. So it's that serious. And I put it down to values. That's what you're assessing. And that's where, whether it's a boss, whether it's individual people, but organizationally, and I get there's legal and compliance and risk who help filter messages that say certain things in a certain way that doesn't increase risk to the organization. But dig through that. And if you continually see people acting outside the values, you got to ask yourself, why am I there? And do these values they state, do they match my values? That begins what you're searching for in the new organization.
Thank you very much, Mike, for this information. So we have another question. It's about the identity ceiling,
Okay.
and it's a good one. What identity beliefs most often limit high potential women, even when they are extremely capable?
Can you say the first part of that question
Yeah.
again? What identity, what?
What identity beliefs most often limit high potential women, even if they are extremely capable? Like, what are the beliefs that women have about them, about their environment, about maybe cultural, societal, that really limit them, and often,
Oh boy.
even though if they are capable.
Okay. This is, I'm going to give two answers. The second one's going to be slightly controversial. I'm going to push it off for a second. I
Yeah,
hope I don't forget it, by the way. But listen, the first thing is I, this word authentic is so important. It's been ruined by social media. It's like ketchup on French fries. It's everywhere. But authentic, I mean it in the pure sense of the word, is that be comfortable with yourself.
yeah,
Now, if you're comfortable, it's really important because you'll come across as you won't be defensive. What happens a lot of times is I see top performing women be defiantly themselves. They announce themselves in a certain way, and it's almost a I dare you to defy me way, if you understand what I'm saying. And so they believe strength and confidence announce their authenticity. In fact, sometimes the louder we shout about who we are and what we stand for, the more it comes across slightly as defensive, and it actually means you're actually probably away from yourself. I mean, that defensiveness comes from slight insecurity inside, and it's expressed outwardly in courageous ways that may not always match. So it's very important to know what you stand for, know the principles that you stand for, but you want to announce them in action and not just words. And you want to announce them in ways that you're building on a power base and describing them, not in ways that say, I dare you to define me. I've kind of mixed both answers, by the way, into that one. And I can see how that can maybe make some people's fillings tingle because wait a second, Mike, but it's super important to be comfortable with who you are, because then you don't have to say who you are, you display who you are. So that's one big thing. Secondly, if you believe in certain things that exist in organizations, and I know they do. I know biases, prejudice exists. It's very important to diagnose it accurately, because if it's a belief that turns out to be a bias that you yourself have, you carry it with you, and it's like a pair of sunglasses that you see everything through that filter. I can give one example. Um, in our marketing department, there was two. This was back in the day when gay was just a really new thing, and we're trying to have diversity training to understand how do we embrace various um, 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 I don't know what to call it, genders, lifestyles, but gay was a big one. And there was a junior person in marketing who made it about everything that he said and did, everything he said and did. The executive, who was also gay, I told him one time, I said, I don't know how to talk to this person because I don't want to be inappropriate. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And he gave me the best comment ever. He said his problem is he sees bias against gays everywhere. And so he sees ghosts. He said, the issue is I'm trying to teach him to let go of that. And he said, I've grown my career by being gay, but I don't need to announce it. I don't need to express it. That's probably massively controversial what I just said, but it helped me understand so much about how this person who became executive vice president of the entire organization went on to be like a Hall of Fame marketer. It wasn't his identity wasn't being gay. He was not hiding it, anything else. His identity was he was really, really good at his job. He was really, really smart. Oh, and by the way, he was gay. So that's two ways of looking at it. And I hope that helps. I'm going to stop there because I want to know your reaction to what I'm saying.
Uh, After all, Mike, we work in companies. We bring our competency and skill to solve problems for the company, as you said. So we're there to work. I understand that it's very important to also work in an environment where you can thrive, when you can grow your career, when there's alignment on values, you feel respectful, you feel secure. Those are also very much important element because we spend most of our time working, and we don't like we spend like when kids and youth spend most of their time studying. Is very important the environment they're studying in. The same thing for career. It's a career, it's a life we live while working, so it's
Right.
very important to have respect, and identity shouldn't be the challenge, or shouldn't be that barrier. It's We need to focus on what we are given the best out there. It's really our competency and solving problems. So is there anything else you feel that from a woman perspective, from a belief perspective, uh, she should also put on the side, women should put on the side to be able to thrive in their career beside identity?
Um, that one quick point on that. Um, the question I think that I would ask women to answer is let's talk about identity for just a second, or in this case, gender, or it could be any other identity. You're right, it doesn't matter. The question is, am I am I witnessing that bias or that prejudice against me or is against the whole population, and that guides your actions, like we've already spoken about. That assessment's very, very important. Rather, so it's not a projection and it's not a an assumption. It's actually, what am I witnessing? So it's very, very important. So then, what else besides identity is your question that women can do to express their executive presence? One of the exercises that I would say is this. Remember, I mentioned that we're all energetic beings. We all have a force field around us, and some people call it charisma. Some people call it a lot of different things. We know it to the negative. So we'll say, "Oh, she got up on the wrong side of the bed today. Oh, somebody's going to have karma is going to, really come back on them." We can see when people are having a bad day. We know it. But sometimes we struggle to understand what our energetic presence looks like on a good side, and that it does influence good side. So one of the key things that I have all my clients do is when you walk into a room, watch and see what happens to the environment. What changes? If nothing changes, that tells you something about your influence on the environment. It might need to be powered up. Now, if you're an introvert and you're in a specific role that's you're not looking for a charismatic, I'm not saying you walk in and say, hey, hi to everybody. Be true to yourself, but walk in and see what is the reaction to my presence in this room. When you get a chance to make a recommendation, one thing I watch for is interruptions. If you're being interrupted, your energy is not commanding enough presence. And in a very nice way that's consistent, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, there's very, very wonderful ways you can take control of that and actually stop that. And there's hand signals you can give, there's sitting back you can give, there's all sorts of ways you can do it. It's got to be consistent with your personality, though. That's another thing you want to watch for, because that's disrespect. So as you walk to the room, what's the vibe? What happens when I go in? Who looks at me? Who doesn't? Secondly, when I'm speaking and presenting information um, based on my personality and what I want to present, how is it being received and am I being respected? Respect is massively important. I think you just said this, and I would watch that. And to me, that's a way that values are expressed is through respect. So I'd
Mhm.
watch those signs. And that would be two things that I'd point to. Does that help, Rula?
It helps a lot. And when we talk about respect, is respect for gender identity, for diversity, but also respect for culture diversity. Because I do know many women who come from different culture, and sometimes the way you are raised doesn't allow you to go to your full potential at work. And that
Mhm.
could be something also that from a leadership perspective, understand those cultural restraint in order to support women to get out of their zone of how we say limitation. So we still have maybe 2 3 minutes, Mike. Um, One last question very quickly, and could maybe also support us with our conclusion. And it's something that from me to you, Mike, which is if someone is today listening, and we have a lot listening, and even people who's going to be listening to the recording as well, and they feel disconnected from their power, they feel disconnected from their power. What is the one question they should ask themselves tonight to begin the shift, to connect to their power?
Wow, you're
That's
really
one
throwing the big ones.
That's one from, it's a call to action to everyone listening to us or will be listening to us. So again, if someone is
Okay.
listening and feel disconnected from their power, what would be the one question they should ask themselves to reconnect with that power?
Okay. This is a beautiful question, Rula. That's probably the best question I've ever been asked. To connect yourself to your power implies you're disconnected, as you've said. And what does it mean to be disconnected? What does power mean? What happens is we lose track of who we are. And in our society and in technology, especially, we have learned to worship the mind. In other words, when we say, oh, do you like that person? Oh, she's smart. Oh, she's really smart. I really like her. She's super smart. We say that. That's first thing. And when we speak from the mind, and we talk about things that are very smart, and we try to take complex things and make them simple, but it's all around intelligence and articulating intelligence and vibrating intelligence. Disconnect comes from, I like to say our power comes from, I point to my heart, but it's also the creativity. What can happen is we get so caught up in the mental activity and the intellectual activity that we lose track of our creativity. And even in science and even in technology world, we live here. We came from here. In other words, this is where instinct lives. This is where intuition lives. This is where creativity lives. This is really our CPU. It does our research. Our brain should do the analysis. It should give us various types of options, very empowering type of ways of viewing the world. But this is where we make decisions. This is where humanness is expressed. And so, as we say we're disconnected, it means that we've forgotten the very important part of who we are, what it means to be human. By the way, what it means to be a mammal. I mean, all mammals come from here. If you think of any animal in the world, they have much more intuition than we do because we've lost it because we live here. So, my invitation is to connect your heart and your mind. The mind does the work for decision making here. Means empowerment. When you're disconnected, you don't empower yourself. And empowerment comes from, let's take brainstorming as a wonderful exercise. Brainstorming says, let's talk about all the possibilities. Let's not judge them. Let's assess them. Let's come up with the ones that seem to make the most sense. And then finally, let's make a decision. It's a very good way to keep the discussion open, not close it, and not make it problem solution. Same thing with ourselves. Let's give ourselves permission to analyze data, to analyze options, but make the decision from your heart, from your values, and from your intuition. It'll be a far better decision, and you will now have connected the two very important parts of yourself. I hope that
And
makes sense.
it makes very much sense. Thank you very much, Mike. I want to really thank you for your energy, your passion, your transparency, your expertise shared with us, and your commitment towards our growth and this community. Any last word, Mike, before we thank everyone also who's joined us? The recording will be sent to all our attendees. So, Mike, any last word?
Master, no, thank you so much for having these two sessions. I've really enjoyed it, and it's such a pleasure. And you can tell I get charged up in helping women to crack the code of rules of a game. They didn't get a chance to write those rules, so how do you crack that code, and how can I help them? I would say that just for anybody listening to this call, um, it's really hard to figure things out on your own. And so I would encourage people to go ahead and get that outside voice. Go ahead and get the coach. Somebody's going to help you a little bit, coach or mentor. But uh, my biggest mistakes were made, and my development slowed down whenever I tried to figure things out on my own. So I would encourage everybody to say, how do I get that outside perspective? And so it's my passion, and I love it. And I really hope that answers, although they had to be somewhat generic, I hope they help in everybody's specific situations. And if not, you know where to find me, and I'd love to talk more about it.
Yes, for sure. We take that. Thank you very much. We take your offer and have a great day, everyone. And thank you, Mike, again. Bye bye.
Cheers. Thank you.